A pleasant greeting to everyone. I am Char Maranan, a student of BA Sociology at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, a student activist and the current spokesperson of Defense Southern Tagalog, an organization who seeks to uphold human rights and civil liberties in the region. Today, I would be talking to you about why the anti-terror law should be junked. I would be sharing my opinion on this very controversial law that has captivated the country as media outlets have talked about. Many law practitioners have expressed their opinion, and currently the said law is in trial before the Supreme Court after 37 petitions against it were raised to the Supreme Court for the junking of the said act. But what is the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020? An article from Nickel Asia states that the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020 amends the Human Security Act of 2007. It expands the definition of terrorism to include acts intended to cause death or serious bodily injury to any person, extensive damage and destruction to public and private properties and infrastructures. It also states that those acts of terrorism could include acts that seek to intimidate the general public, create an atmosphere or message of fear, or seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, economic, and social structures of the country. Those found guilty of these offenses will be given life sentences without any chance for parole. In addition, the Act also criminalizes the threat, planning, training, facilitating of, and proposal and inciting to terrorist activities by means of speeches, proclamations, writings, banners, and emblems. It also subjects suspects to surveillance, warrantless arrests, and detention for up to 24 days. In addition, it removes compensation for the suspect in the event of acquittal and boosts the Anti-Terrorism Council, the implementer of the law, whose members are appointed by the President. The Human Security Act of 2007 was enacted into law as a means to further the government's war against terrorism. It is a law to battle the insurgency happening in the countryside, and at the same time, the Human Security Act seeks to be able to punish those who are accused of terrorism. But then under the anti-terrorism law, as I have discussed and mentioned earlier, the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020 expands the definition of terrorism. One of the reasons why petitioners are against the anti-terrorism law because of its vague definition of what terrorism is, as I have mentioned earlier. And who is the interpreter of what is terrorism? Then that is the government, that is the proponents of this law, and most of them will be members of the Anti-Terrorism Council who would be appointed by the President himself. So why do we fear for our lives when we talk of the anti-terrorism law? Why do we want it junked? No. First and foremost, because it is against the Constitution. It is against the very values that is enshrined in the Constitution's Bill of Rights. Petitioners say that at least 15 provisions of the Constitution's Bill of Rights are being infringed upon by this law. This includes right to free speech, right to freedom of religion, right to freedom of assembly, right to freedom of association, freedom of the press, due process of the law, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, right to privacy, right to travel, right to bail, presumption of innocence, freedom of information, right against ex post facto laws, right against torture and incommunicado detention, and academic freedom. These are the 15 rights that the law currently infringes upon. It stifles dissent. It seeks to silence the critical opinion of others who are against the government. Even before the implementation of this law, the Duterte regime has already showed its bloody trail and its war on drugs, and now its war against the people. Its war against insurgency is in the context of the implementation of Executive Order 70, or the whole of nation approach, which formed the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. The said task force continues to red tag progressive organizations, individuals, branding them as members of terrorist groups such as the Communist Party of the Philippines and the New People's Army. Such designations are very, very dangerous for activists like me. If it's any indication, hundreds of activists have been killed or have been arrested on trumped-up charges under the Duterte regime. Our right to life, liberty, and safety is being attacked by this very law. The Anti-Terrorism Act would justify these criminal offenses against activists and members of progressive organizations. If it's any indication, a day after the signing of the anti-terror bill into a law, on July 4, 2020, the Cabuyao 11 was arrested after holding a peaceful program in Barangay Pulo, Cabuyao, Laguna. They were violently dispersed by police and military officers staying at the Barangay Hall of Barangay Pulo. On March 7, 2020, 9 activists were killed in what was dubbed as the Bloody Sunday raids and massacre in the Southern Tagalog region. And this is not only happening in the Southern Tagalog region, but in other regions as well. The police and military has done a killing spree against activists or members of progressive organizations who have had expressed their dissent against the current government's policies. Being an activist right now seems to be a death sentence for many of us. Sinasabi sa mga aktivista na hindi naman daw mga aktivista ang target ng anti-terror law. Na poprotektahan naman ang mga karapatan ng mga aktivista dahil iba ang aktivismo sa terorismo. Pero makikita natin that indeed actions speak louder than words. That the Duterte regime's actions has said it loud and clear that it is not the terrorists that you are after. You brand activists as terrorists. Anyone who expresses dissent against the government is a target of this anti-terrorism law. So, I have lost colleagues, friends, very, very recently, and it breaks my heart to know that such a law can justify their killing because they are branded as terrorists, as members of communist terrorist groups. This is why it's very important that we unite in the call to junk this law. We do not want other lives to be put in jeopardy. One death is one too many. Napakarami nang namatay sa mga gyera ni Duterte laban sa mga mamamayan. Kaya ngayon ang panahon para tayo ay magkaisa upang ibasura ang batas na ito na naglalagay sa atin sa peligro. Maraming salamat.